You're listening to the Australian Army Training and Doctrine Podcast.
Welcome to our second podcast in the Cove's three-part series on amphibious operations. In this edition, we'll be looking more closely at the unit at the heart of the Australian Army's amphibious capability, and that's 2nd Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, known as 2RAR. With me is the battalion's Regimental Sergeant Major, Warrant Officer Class 1 Trent Morris. So, first of all, tell us a bit about 2RAR's history and why it's become a focus for amphibious capability.
Well, ma'am, the unit was tasked by Chief of Army to develop the amphibious capability and the trials, obviously with the introduction of service of the LHDs and the HMAS Chools. So for the last 5 years, the battalion has been heavily embedded in that trial, developing the capability along with other units such as 10 FSB, the 2nd Cavalry Regiment and 1RAR to a point. So what we've done is we've developed, and over the last 12 months as we've looked and gone forward, we identified that the risk for the amphibious operations and the training liability lies within the pre-landing force. So under the new structure, the Chief of Army has determined that we will adopt and become the Army's pre-landing force, the amphibious capability. And so as such, we will move from an organisation currently of 570 pers to 300 personnel to provide that pre-landing force. The idea of the pre-landing force is that that's where the risk lies and the training liability in the operation of small craft, sea states 1 to 4, at night coming ashore in an uncertain environment. And so that is why the battalion has been tasked to do that. But secondly, and more importantly, the battalion has also been tasked to remain very much an infantry battalion that is capable of both joint land combat and obviously the amphibious operations.
So in order to meet the brief in terms of generating this amphibious capability, what has that actually meant for training for soldiers within 2RAR?
Yeah, so we're going into a new era, which is quite interesting, and there's been a lot of rumour and innuendo about what it is and 2RAR closing, and it's not the case. 2RAR will be 2RAR. It will change its dynamics and organisation. We'll go to a security company of 4 platoons, and we'll have an ISR company consisting of obviously pioneers, small boats, reconnaissance signals, and the DFSW will reside in the security company. And we'll also have a reduced signals platoon. So we're going for more of a specialised approach, and the centre of gravity for the unit will be the insertion of our pre-landing force elements by small craft.
So can you take us through those different elements, those different capabilities that you're generating within the battalion, and just describe how they are each contributing to that amphibious capability?
Yeah, as part of the advanced force operations in the pre-landing force, we rely very heavily on the ISR aspect of that through reconnaissance platoon, and we've also been lucky over the last 2 years. It's been remiss of me to mention that we've obviously had engineers, 2 sections of engineers embedded in the battalion, which have done a great job, and they've been aptly supported by 3CR. We've also been supported heavily through a JFT and a JFEC through 108 Battery, which has been part of the 2nd Battalion and posted to our posted strength, and they've been aptly supported through 4 Regiment as well, through backfilling of members that have done courses and skills. So with the insertion of the ISR, we rely heavily on our recon and our snipers, of which we have 4 patrols, 4 sniper pairs, and we will maintain a JFT to provide that joint fires, which is that combat multiplier once we've got advanced force operations ashore. And we like to try and get them ashore for 72 or 96 is good, but at least 72 hours forward onto the target to identify obviously our key enemy locations and positions, and then provide the commander obviously that feedback as we continue to plan prior to putting the security platoon ashore to set the conditions for obviously the beach landing team, which is usually provided by 10 FSB. We work very closely with the ISR. We've been bolstered, and once again remiss of me not to talk about the Navy clearance divers, and they have come up, and as part of the training continuum, they've also completed for the last 3 years our basic reconnaissance course. And once again, they bolster our ability to push our 4 recon patrols and sniper pairs, and they will also do clearances of beaches, subsurface clearances, and then have re-rolled recently to then provide more recon asset on the ground for the commander.
So given that 2RAR's composition and capability is unique, what have the challenges been?
Well, the challenges have been to remain very entry focused and to have a focus on joint land combat, and then obviously to develop the way forward with the operations from the LHD and obviously the LSD with the Chools. They're big ships, they're big organisations with large amounts of staff. We've obviously had the complexity too of working to Amphibious Task Group to the Cadovan Cliff, who command us for those operations. And so there's multiple levels of command, and then with that comes complexity, but through personality, knowledge and robust SOPs, that's developed. So the soldiers going ashore They've got the opportunity to plan, insert, and obviously by the command structure and a clear command structure, it takes away risk. When we put our lads and ladettes into small craft and insert them by night into uncertain conditions.
Just describe for us then how soldiers have responded perhaps to that different and unique command structure.
Oh, well, the soldiers, once they're on a ship, the ship is it's a large ship. Both the ships are quite large, the three of them are. However, they are very small, very tight. And when you have in excess of 1,300 people in bark forces plus 400 of the ship's crew, obviously space becomes a premium, and so does a process. And so at that point there, you have obviously the commands of the ship. And when we're in an ARG, Amphibious Ready Group, you have the 3 ships. You also then have the ATG, the Amphibious Task Group headquarters, and then you have obviously the headquarters of the relevant elements on board. So it can be complex when it comes to planning and obviously implementation of plan. And same with the soldiers, they work sometimes in cramped conditions. They have to access, sometimes when a decision is made, it doesn't just have a first and second order effect, it goes into a third, fourth and fifth order effect, and that may be something as simple as moving unleaded petrol from one part of the ship to the other. That's to the ship's captain. They'll mount a standing sea fire party to combat any type of incident or spill, and that is just to move 80 litres of unleaded from one part of the ship to the other. So in a battalion, it's a no-brainer, but on a ship, ship's captains get a little bit antsy if you start moving volatile liquid around their ship, and they haven't given clearance to do that. So, and the complexity of that. And the ladies and gents have done a really good job in understanding the limitations and being patient with Navy, and as Navy have with us, have been very patient in the way we've doing business. So we've worked hard to establish that rapport over the last 5 years, and I think that's probably been the most important part of amphibious operations, is that relationship and the ability to accept each other's differences.
Now, you talked there about the importance of rapport and establishing a relationship. Has that meant a requirement for some kind of cultural or attitude shift from the members of the battalion?
Ma'am, to be honest, the 2nd Battalion's always had a reputation of being the quiet achievers. And with that comes a little bit of humility, it comes a little bit of understanding. And so there is friction on the ship every now and then and it flares, but what I find is that if it's nipped in the bud early and people are responsive and they engage, and all I've asked for, both the Navy and myself, if the soldiers are doing something wrong and they don't understand it, not to fire a broadside initially, pardon the pun, first off, is to actually explain to the soldier why they can't do that and why they shouldn't do that, and the guys and girls respond accordingly. And I'm the same with the Navy. As I get around the ship and as we do business, it's about sitting people down because they've got a perception of risk and explaining to them why we do that process, why the process needs to be that way. And once people have an understanding of that, you meet in the middle and we get the task done. So it's the way it's got to be. And that's just built on being basic manners, to be honest, and maintaining a level of humility and professionalism, on the ship. And I've been really proud of my guys and girls for the last 5 years, the way they've conducted themselves. And I'm regularly approached by people who are surprised to say, hey, you've got a really good bunch of guys and girls. And I say, yeah, I know that. And it's not a surprise to me. I work with them every day. But it's always very rewarding when Navy people and or people from outside our command comment on the behaviours and their attitudes of the guys and girls.
And this isn't the first time you've worked in the joint space, because you were at 3 RER prior to 2 RER. So tell us a bit about the challenges of working in the joint space and perhaps how soldiers can set themselves up best to prepare for working with amphibious capability.
There's a number of things you can't control. When I was doing parachuting, I couldn't control the RAF, that's a fact, and I couldn't control the weather. It's 2 things well out of my control, I'll say the Padre there. And same with Navy. So you're not drawing a long bow when we move into amphibious operations. I cannot control the weather, and the Navy, they're the Navy. But you've got to mitigate both, and the end state is always to get, in my head, meet my CO and Cliff's intent by getting the pre-landing force ashore. But more importantly, the most important thing to me is that I mitigate as much risk as I can to get my soldiers ashore with a limited risk, because there's nothing we're doing in training that's worth the loss of life and or serious injury. So we're quite heavily with that, and we do get busy, and there's a lot of complexities of the operation before you even start, which is the insertion. Now at 3RAR there are a lot of similarities between airborne and amphibious operations, and people may argue that, but there is. I've lived both of them in regards to the marry up with advanced forces, the insertion of the ISR, and then setting the conditions with a small force to secure an air point of entry, and now in our case it's a sea point of entry or a beach to have a follow-on force come ashore to do the task. And so there's a lot of similarities there. But to do that, it's complex. And so a lot of the soldiers, and that they're planning a phase which is complex before they even get into their tasks themselves. And yes, it's just the insertion, and people say, hey, it's only an insertion method. It is, but it's complex, especially when you're talking about a deck and dock cycles, trying to do it all under a period of darkness. It's all about time. And as we know in Army, when time compresses, things start to go wrong. So, we just need to have our drills squared and wide and make sure it's slick, and that comes through rehearsals and it comes through preparation and planning. So there's a lot of similarities in both the units that I've worked with over the time. And I had a bit of a joke with the CO when I first got here. I said I've just gone from one crap insertion method to another, just gone from being thrown around the back of a C-130 to throwing around a landing craft or a small craft and going ashore covered in salt as opposed to vomit. So there hasn't been too much of a difference there. I'm really proud about the way the guys and girls get about it. It's confronting, when the sea's up and you're getting into a small craft and you're 5 to 6 nautical miles and even in some cases further off the coast, and you've got to go in and get the job done, and that's what we do. So, hats off to our junior commanders, our lieutenants, senior NCOs and the corporals about a way to adapt quickly to changes of plan and not kick the can, so to speak, just get on and get the job done. And that's what the CO talks about, just get the job done. So in closing with that, yes, they've been, and I've seen our boys and girls really develop in regards to their flexibility and their ability to do a lot with not a lot. And it's been a really pleasing aspect of my job over the last 3 years.
So you've talked there about complexity, you've talked about the importance of drills, of rehearsals, and also of attitude. Is there anything else that soldiers can do to prepare themselves for working in this space?
I think fitness is a large part of what we do, and I hate the term because we use resilience and we throw it out way too much. But that fitness is good for both mental health, and it's good for obviously keeping injuries at bay, because they do work with some quite heavy equipment in various conditions. And by having that fitness, it allows when the going does get tough and they are tired, they are wet and soaked to the bone in some cases, it's the middle of the night and it's cold, to still do their job and function as a soldier. So we've worked very hard over the last 2 years to develop that within the unit, and also the level of detail to trust your junior leaders, that they understand mission command in its purest form, understand the CO's intent, and everyone moves forward to meet that CO's intent. And secondly, what I want from my soldiers, in all honesty, is I want them to be engaging, I want them to be polite, and I want them to carry a number of skills in their back pocket to get the job done. Because you need people to want to work with you in the joint space. If you are arrogant, if you are dismissive, you don't have a capability. And as such, you are destined to fail. You are destined to fail, and that is a fact. So don't be scared to use your intelligence, use your brain, be polite, be engaging, sell your capability at every available opportunity, and off we go and do good things. And I'd rather behaviours like that have an effect across Army, and it's about taking every opportunity to put the best foot forward for your unit. And that's not me, it's not the CO. We do what we do, but I need my junior leaders, lieutenants, section commanders, platoon sergeants, and our soldiers, more importantly, to sell our capability, and they do that through professionalism and humility, two big key aspects of soldiering.
Now, in October 2017, 2RER came under the direct command of 1st Division. What does that mean for the battalion?
We've worked some big, long hours as a command team behind the scenes to set the conditions to meet Chief of Army's intent. And we've been lucky. We've had this year, in particular, my last CO, Michael Bathenswaite, was a good man. He worked very hard, and he fulfilled both the role of CO2RR and the Cliff Commander Landing Force, having to balance two roles. Well, we've been lucky this year where they've implemented now a Cliff at full colonel level, and we've been lucky there with Colonel Mal Wells coming into the position with his staff down at ATG. And they've developed as well and developed a good relationship, and that's allowed my CO to be CO2RR full-time, and it's what we need. It's still a functional battalion with all the administrative requirements and burden that goes behind the scenes to obviously get our guys and girls into the field. So that's been a real relief, actually, to have that level of command sitting above us. And with effect 15th of October, we've now direct command unit of 1 Div with the Colonel, and now through to the Major General. And the staff from 1 Div have been really engaging at all levels through all the cells to make sure that has occurred seamlessly. And we're doing things now to the soldiers on the ground, no change. They know they've got a Major General there who's very much in our corner, who's very driven to see the capability go ahead. But it's just for us, as we're doing things now, from little things to big things, it's just the first time we've done it. But once again, through, as we talked about, being polite and coming up and having a plan and engaging with people, you get the response you want. It's probably a little bit clunky initially, but once we've got an established process, which we've worked hard to do, things have been quite seamless, to be honest. It's been surprisingly smooth. So, it's been a good transition as we go forward. It's a new command structure, but to the soldiers out in the companies at the moment, that hasn't been much of a change. What has been a change is the unit. We're going from 570 people, and probably The saddest part of my job in the last 2.5 years is we've had to let in excess of 140 to 150 soldiers post to other units. And those soldiers have worked extremely hard over the last 3 or 4 years to, in some cases 2 years, depending on how long they've been in the unit, to develop this capability. And we've had to go to 300. And to do that, we've had to release soldiers and junior NCOs, senior NCOs and warrant officers who are quality people. And it's been sad to do that, but we've dealt with people on an individual level to get them what they need.
In summary then, perhaps reflecting back on the transition and also the building of amphibious capability within 2RAR, what do you think are the kind of take-home messages? What's worked and perhaps what have been the main lessons learned?
The joint areas, it's always an interesting area, and I think if you can work in the joint domain, there's no real secret to it. It's opposed to just engaging, being professional, seeking to understand both yourself and understand what you can do well, what you need help with, understanding the other organisations you're working with, what they can provide, and don't be scared to ask them to go along the journey with you and assist in some cases. Don't just sit back and throw rocks. If they're not meeting the standard that you need them to do, actively engage and seek to help them get to the standard that you need, and we've done that in some cases. In some cases, we've had people help us as well. It shouldn't be about personality. It should be about robust SOPs and development of doctrine, which we take forward. And the other part is education. I think a lot of people have believed that this whole amphib piece has resided with 2RAR, which it has through the trial, where we've provided both the ground combat element, the LCE for the log, and we've provided the pre-landing force. Now that's going to change with effect next year. We will be the pre-landing force. The 8th 9th Battalion, a very decent battalion, will provide the ground combat element out of 7 Brigade as they go through the force gen cycle. And that'll be interesting. They're a very, very decent battalion, and we'll engage through ATG and 1 div with them to ensure, and obviously 7 CISB as well, that we set the conditions to operate off the ships. Because this Amphibious isn't just about 2RAR, it's about whole army. We've spent a lot of money on 3 very big ships that provide an outstanding capability. The ability to force project heavy armour in the region. It's not something that's been done before. Heavy artillery off the chulls, via CH-47. And the amount of capability those LHDs bring to defence it's untapped. And 2RAR understand it. Now, it's in closing, it's about the rest of the Defence Force understanding what those magnificent big ships bring to the party.
Warrant Officer Class 1 Trent Morris, RSM of 2RAR, thank you very much. To find out more about amphibious capability, listen to the first and final podcast in this 3-part series and check out our other resources on the Cove. The web address is www.cove.org.au. That's www.cove.org.au. In our final podcast in this 3-part series, also available on the Cove, we'll be looking at amphibious operations overseas and Australia's contribution. I'm Captain Sharon Mascaldare. Thank you for listening.
This podcast is produced by the Australian Army and is copyright the Commonwealth of Australia.